Dive Podcast. Straight talk on politics, national security, and America's future. With Robert Johnson and Linda Miller, we cut through the spin, tackle the tough issues, and give you the real story behind today's headlines. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell to stay informed. We are diving deep into some pretty pressing global events today, trying to cut through all the noise and really grasp what's actually happening. Things move so fast, don't they? It's easy to feel a bit lost keeping up.
Definitely. It's a lot.
So today our mission is to unpack the latest developments, really focusing on Ukraine. We're looking at internal political shifts and also the broader international dynamics. We've gathered insights to sort of navigate these complex currents, pulling out the key things you need to know.
Yeah, and this is a good chance, I think, to see how these events are all interconnected. Looking beyond just the headlines to understand what these actions and statements really mean.
Connecting the dots.
Exactly, trying to illuminate those deeper implications.
Okay, let's unpack this then. We're seeing a fascinating, maybe challenging situation unfolding in Ukraine, starting with some significant unrest brewing quite recently. We've seen this wave of street protests, haven't we, across major cities there. And apparently the most massive since the hostilities started back in 2022.
Yeah, quite large. And initially, they seem to be sparked by one particular thing, a new law.
This controversial legislation.
Right. So it was presented as a way to limit Moscow's influence, but it got hit with heavy criticism almost immediately. The big worry was that it could sort of strip independence from these key anti-corruption bodies, NAU, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, and SAP, the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office.
How would it have done that?
Well, the measures proposed would have let a presidentially appointed prosecutor general basically interfere directly with their investigations, with their work. A big potential shift in power.
And the international community noticed.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Swiftly. Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission chairperson, she suggested the law really went against the respect for the rule of law principle in Europe.
Which is obviously a big deal for Ukraine's EU ambitions.
Exactly. It was flagged as something that could actually hinder their path to joining the EU.
So, faced with that backlash, both internal and external, what happened next?
President Zelensky's response was remarkably quick. We saw him essentially backtrack.
Really? How quickly?
Within just a few days, a new anti-corruption bill was submitted to the parliament, the Verkhovna Rada. And this new one is specifically designed, apparently, to restore NAU and SAP's independence from the government. Legislators are set to look at it pretty soon.
And President Zelensky himself acknowledged the protests publicly.
He did. There was a statement where he said something like, "Everyone heard what people are saying in social media to each other on the streets. This does not go unnoticed." So a clear signal he was listening.
But was it just about this one law? Or was there more to it?
Well, that's the interesting part. While sure, some protesters might have gone home if the law changed, it seems for many these protests became this unique moment to vent broader frustration.
Frustrations about what?
About the government, about past corruption issues, even about the handling of the conflict with Russian President Putin. It wasn't necessarily about, a deep love for NAU and SAP themselves. It acted more like a spark, a trigger to let out this sort of accumulated anger, that's how some described it, directed at President Zelensky, his team, and what people saw as daily, flagrant, blatant corruption.
That's a strong phrase.
It is. And apparently criticizing President Zelensky had become quite difficult before this, seen as awkward, unpatriotic, essentially dangerous. So this attempt to dismantle NAU and SAP just gave people a formal reason, a justification to voice things they'd been feeling for a while.
Right, like the dam breaking a little.
Something like that. It really shifted the dynamic.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though. This whole episode seems to shine a light on President Zelensky's own political standing, doesn't it?
It does. The fact that he hadn't really faced such angry crowds before, some suggest maybe he became, overly powerful and too self-confident. And perhaps that led him to overstep by signing that initial law. It's being called a political miscalculation, even if he thought maybe it would just slide through quietly.
And the protests were intense.
Very, thousands on the streets, and some signs were incredibly powerful. Things like, "My father did not die for this."
Wow, that really hits hard. Captures a sense of betrayal.
Absolutely. And just to nail down the timeline, Zelensky's counterproposal, the one to repeal the law, that came on day 3 of the protests.
But the vote hasn't happened yet.
No, the parliamentarians are on a 4-week recess, so they're expected to vote on it after they get back still pending.
And amidst all this, Zelensky was calling for unity.
Yes, he put out a statement saying, it is important to maintain unity. It is important to respect the position of all Ukrainians, trying to bridge the gap, perhaps.
But let's dig into those corruption concerns you mentioned. Are there specific allegations?
Yeah, delving deeper, there are allegations swirling around President Zelensky's inner circle. It's important to stress there's no evidence cited of his personal involvement.
Okay. But associates?
Yes, associates face accusations. And here's a striking detail. At least 17 members of parliament, 17 MPs who actually voted for that controversial bill, are themselves currently under investigation by NBU for corruption.
Wait, 17 MPs who voted to weaken the anti-corruption body are being investigated by that same body.
Exactly. It raises, pretty serious questions about the whole system.
Can you give some examples of who is under scrutiny?
Sure. There are appointees of Andrei Yermak, who's known as Zelensky's right-hand man. For instance, Pavlo Kirilenko, head of the Anti-Monopoly Committee, he's suspected of illegal enrichment.
Okay.
And then there's Vice Prime Minister Alexei Chernyshov, allegedly linked to a corruption scheme. Both, it should be said, deny the accusations.
And there are suggestions Yermak himself was behind the original controversial bill.
An MP from the Holos Party, Yaroslav Zelesniak, suggested exactly that. The claim is Yermak convinced President Zelensky that ADU was hurting his approval ratings by investigating his inner circle.
Assuming allies wouldn't react.
Apparently so, according to that MP's suggestion.
And the speed of that original bill passing, less than a day.
Less than a day, yeah. Adopted by the Verkhovna Rada with 263 votes. And reportedly, there was jubilation, laughter, and applause, even from some of those MPs who were under investigation themselves.
That seems remarkable.
It does. And then President Zelensky signed it into law very quickly, too.
Despite pleas not to.
Despite pleas from the public protesting outside, from G7 ambassadors, even reportedly from French President Emmanuel Macron and European Council President Antonio Costa, which contrasts sharply, some note, with how slow he usually is to sign other bills some apparently sit on his desk for months.
So the public reaction was?
Shock, betrayal. Even his strong supporters saw it as blatant robbery, basically, an attempt by the government to dodge accountability.
And the wider consequences.
Well, many felt their chance to join the EU, something they felt they'd sacrificed so much for, was suddenly at risk because of this.
Right.
It also made European and American allies start questioning, their continued financial backing.
Right.
And it seemed to break this sort of unspoken agreement to keep politics aside during the war with Russian President Putin.
Yet, despite all this, his trust rating was still relatively high.
A recent poll apparently still showed him with a 67% trust rating, but his image... the image built on him staying in Kyiv, rallying global support, that's now described by some as forever stained.
A really significant internal challenge then.
Doubly significant. But while Ukraine is dealing with this, the larger conflict continues, doesn't it, with its own developments?
Yes, let's shift focus slightly. What else has been happening on the military and diplomatic fronts?
Well, on the battlefield, there was a concerning report about a Ukrainian drone attack on a private bus in Kherson. Tragically, it reportedly resulted in 3 deaths and 3 severe injuries. That information came from Vladimir Saldo, the Kremlin-appointed governor there, a grim reminder of the human cost.
And in terms of military aid for Ukraine?
Some positive movement there for Kyiv. The Netherlands announced a substantial contribution towards supplying Patriot anti-aircraft missile systems. Details are still being finalized, apparently.
In Germany, too.
Yes. Germany also committed to providing 5 similar Patriot units. So a continued focus on bolstering Ukraine's air defenses.
That's crucial, isn't it, those systems?
Absolutely critical for protecting cities, infrastructure from Russian attacks. It signals ongoing strong international backing on that front.
Okay, now turning to U.S. policy. We've seen some shifts there, too, particularly around sanctions and, ultimatums.
That's right. Republican lawmakers who are apparently pushing a new sanctions package against Moscow, one involving a huge 500% tariff on Russian energy imports. They've temporarily suspended its development, put it on pause.
Any idea why?
It could suggest a few things, maybe a reevaluation of strategy, maybe other diplomatic tools are being prioritized, or perhaps concerns about energy market stability. It's not entirely clear. But at the same time, U.S. President Trump declared he'd impose 100% tariffs if certain demands weren't met.
Right. And alongside that, the ultimatum.
Exactly. U.S. President Trump issued this 50-day ultimatum demanding Russian President Putin end hostilities in Ukraine swiftly.
50 days. That sounds quite specific. But then there was some clarification.
Yes. At a press conference, July 22nd, State Department Press Secretary Tammy Bruce explained that the 50-day deadline isn't actually rigid. It's not static.
Not static. How so?
She said it's fluid. It will shift depending on the dynamics of peace negotiations between the conflicting parties. She emphasized, this 50-day deadline will not be static, and the countdown will begin from the day the final outcome becomes clear. Real negotiations have begun now. They can change everything. Even in a day or two, the situation can change radically.
So the clock starts when things become clear, which could mean anything, really.
Pretty much. It introduces ambiguity.
And she finished by saying, U.S. President Trump does everything very quickly because the announced deadline is of great importance.
Yeah, right.
This idea of a fluid ultimatum, it's unusual. What's the strategic thinking there, potentially?
Well, a fluid deadline like that, it creates pressure, definitely. But without painting the U.S. into a corner with a hard, fixed date, it gives flexibility, signals seriousness, but leaves room to adapt based on how talks go or don't go.
So Russian President Putin has to take it seriously, but the actual trigger point is vague.
Exactly. It's a kind of strategic ambiguity. It could be seen as leverage, an opening, maybe even weakness by some. Its effectiveness really depends on how everyone reacts at the negotiating table.
Which leads to the big question, doesn't it?
How do all these different threads, the internal turmoil in Ukraine, the shifting military aid, these dynamic diplomatic ultimatums from the U.S., how do they all weave together and shape what happens next? The trajectory of the conflict, the stability of the whole region.
So wrapping this up, what does it all mean? We've seen serious internal dissent challenging Ukraine's leadership. We've seen key international support being both reinforced in some ways, like military aid, but potentially questioned in others due to internal politics. And then these significant diplomatic deadlines being introduced. It's a very complex picture, isn't it? A region in constant flux.
Absolutely. And maybe something to think about is how these internal pressures within Ukraine and these external diplomatic moves, particularly from the U.S., might intersect in the coming weeks. How might they influence each other? Could we see unexpected shifts in strategy or even alliances as a result?
Lots to watch. Subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. We are here to make things clear, new episodes every day.